Hello guys, welcome to our channel Book Review 360. Today the book which we are going to review is Animal Farm by George Orwell. Uh, Before we start off, let me tell you that this is a new channel, and we're going to review different books, books on literature, philosophy, history, political science, international relations, everything. And your suggestions are more than welcome. You can post in the comments which books you want us to get you to review, and any other things which come to your mind. You can just post it, and you can write how we can improve these reviews. Uh, Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Book Review 360, so that you get the updates as soon as we upload a new review. So, without further ado, let's start. And Animal Farm by George Orwell. Uh, some background about the author, George Orwell. Uh, the name uh, the name of the book, of course, is Animal Farm. It's a novel. Uh, we also call it an allegory. But there is an important thing, that the name of George Orwell. His real name was Eric Arthur Blair. George Orwell. Many people don't know that George Orwell was Blair's pen name. And George Orwell was born in India in 1903 to British parents. Okay, and he wrote Animal Farm in 1943, but just 7 years after he died in 1950. Moving on, talking about the plot and setting of Animal Farm. Uh, Animal Farm is a political novel set on a British farm where barnyard animals successfully revolt against a human master who has exploited them. And the name of the master is Mr. Jones, as we will see later on. So, what is Animal Farm? I mean, it's a novel, of course, but what sort of novel? So, firstly, Animal Farm is a fable. Now, what is a fable? A fable has two levels of meaning. On the surface, this novel, the fable, is about animals, but on a secondary level, the animals stand for types of people or ideas. For example, uh, pigs, let's suppose Napoleon represents Stalin, or ideas, let's suppose animalism, it represents communism. So it's a fable. Animal Farm is a fable. Secondly, it's also an allegory. And what is an allegory? An allegory is a type of fiction that has multiple level of meanings. And lastly, it's also a satire. As you will, or you might have or not read the book, but it's a satire. It makes fun of the political system and the situation, the political society after the Bolshevik Revolution, which is also known as Russian Revolution. Now, talking about Russian Revolution, before we dig into the book, some context is necessary. So, Russian Revolution occurred in March 1917. It was brought on by economic hardship and the injustices of the Russian czars, and was encouraged by the Communist Manifesto of Karl Marx. The czars of Russia, especially uh, Nicholas II, the czar, was overthrown, and the revolutionaries assumed leadership of the country. They tried to transform the country through communist principles. So, and after the revolution under Joseph Stalin, the country fell under totalitarianism. And what is totalitarianism? It's a form of government with strong central rule that tries to control individual freedoms. So, Stalin instituted 5 year plans to increase economic growth, but the farmers and the production of the farms decreased for some reason. He ordered the farmers who opposed his collective farming schemes. Uh, he sent them to the labor camps. He deported them. He executed them. Not everyone, of course, wanted a communist country in Soviet Union. In 1920s, the peasants revolted against the government's efforts to turn their individual farms into collective farms. Of course, farmers wanted to reap the rewards of their labor, but Stalin, under his own unique form of communism, which some call Stalinism or totalitarianism, wanted the farmers to, field collectively in the farms and give all their output to the state, which the peasants revolted to. By 1938, Stalin began to use what became later known as Moscow Purge trials to control those workers and peasants. Many peasants were killed, tried for treason, or sent to labor camps. So, some historical context about Karl Marx is also necessary before you jump on to understand Animal Farm by George Orwell. So, Karl Marx was born in Prussia in 1818. He was a journalist whose unpopular views forced him to leave his country. Eventually, he and Friedrich Engels published the Communist Manifesto, a pamphlet outlining Marx's ideas about government and economics, including his belief that pure communism would be the inevitable outcome of human history. Continuing with the historical context, in Russia by the early 1900s, the writings of Karl Marx, increasing economic hardship, and the injustices of the successive czars, inspired widespread revolt, which ultimately led to the Russian Revolution. Tsar Nicholas II was overthrown and later executed with his wife and children. A provisional government of the revolutionaries assumed leadership, but only 7 months later, the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, overthrew the provisional government. This is famously known as the October Revolution. The Bolsheviks renamed themselves the Russian Communist Party and became known as the Reds. Some more on historical context. After Lenin died in 1924, a power struggle began for the control of the Communist Party between two major contenders, and that's where Animal Farm by George Orwell, you know, takes on a life. And the two contenders were Leon Trotsky, who was a talented party organizer who had played an important role in the Russian Revolution. And the second, his contender was Joseph Stalin, who was the Secretary General of the Communist Party and favored a modified form of Marxism. Of course, Stalin had the better of Trotsky and he had him exiled. So, following a struggle marked by assassination and betrayal, Trotsky was exiled in 1968. Stalin became the undisputed dictator of the Soviet Union, unchallenged, the supreme. Later, his agents assassinated Trotsky in Mexico, who was in exile there. Stalin instituted a series of 5 year plans to increase economic growth, but production and output decreased due to bureaucratic red tape. So let's jump on to the novel. Who is who and what is what in the novel? Since it's an allegory, we need to relate, we need to connect what the characters, the places represent in the actual state of affairs in the Soviet Union. So, Mr. Jones, the owner of the animal farm, previously, of course, known as the Manor Farm, represents Tsar Nicholas II, who actually treated the animals in the farm badly, to say the least. He didn't give them the food, and one day, of course, when he left them hungry, the animals revolted and they took over the farm. Napoleon, uh, the pig, the main pig, the character in the novel, represents Joseph Stalin. He was vile and cunning and who outsmarted Snowball. Of course, Squealer, the right hand, we can call him the right hand of Napoleon, and he denotes Russian media, the media campaign of Joseph Stalin, which manipulated the thought process of the population, the populace. Snowball, of course, represents Leon Trotsky, who was exiled and later killed by Joseph Stalin's men. Old Major, the old pig, represents Karl Marx or Vladimir Lenin, who were the founders of communism, the original ideas, the principles of communism. Boxer, the horse, represents the working class of communist Russia. They were hardworking people and they got little in return. Molly represents the upper class who were, after the revolution even they were satisfied with the status quo. They were not the revolutionaries. Dogs represent the military police of Joseph Stalin, whom he used to oppress and silence the opposition. Moses, the bird, represents Russian Orthodox Church, since we know that Joseph Stalin used religion to convince the people, to teach them that there is the plight, the misery of their condition was actually something related to religion. He wanted the people to believe in fatalism, that things are uh, because they are. I mean, there is no reason to it. Stalin used to propagate this. Hens represent peasant farmers back in the day of Joseph Stalin, who produced eggs, which produced eggs, but they got little in return. So that was the plight of the peasant farmers in the day of Soviet Union, where the proletariat, the proles, used to produce goods, but in return they got nothing. And lastly, the sheep represent masses which who followed Stalin blindly, probably because they were kept from information. They were indoctrinated to follow the state, whatever the states said. Moving on, the places. Animal Farm represents the Soviet Union. Manor Farm, which was owned by Mr. Jones, represents Russia. Farmhouse represents the Kremlin. The Kremlin, as we all know, is today the capital of Russia. And the candy mountain, which of course Moses referred to, animals that they would get heaven if they if they endure. So it relates to that. So things and events, animalism. The pigs which preached to the all the animals in the beginning that you know animals should be ruling over themselves. It represents communism. Like communism is that there shouldn't be any hierarchies. People should be free. Uh, Animal committees, pigs formed different animal committees, and those represented Soviet committees where all the planning was done, how the state is to be run, you know which resources, where the resources are to be dedicated. So those are represented by animal committees. Remember once again that Animal Farm is an allegory, and every symbol, every person denotes some real life character. Beasts of England, it was the anthem. It represents the ideology of communism. Windmill, which was laboriously built by all the animals. It represents Stalin's 5-year plans. Who made plans, who rolled out plans that they need to construct this and that just to keep the people busy, regardless of whether the resources was utilized in the most efficient manner or not. The animal revolt, of course, represents Russian Revolution. Battle of Cowshed represents Red October. The Hans Revolt represents the Ukrainian peasants' bitter resistance to collective farming because the peasants wanted to reap the rewards of their labor. Destruction of the windmill represents the failure of Stalin's plans, the bureaucracy, the red tapeism in the Stalin plans, central planning, the flaws in all those things, ineffective, the flawed in the modified version of the communism of Stalin. That the destruction of windmill represents that. Selling of wood to the Frederick represents Nazi-Soviet pact, and Battle of Windmill represents Battle of Stalingrad, which was actually the German invasion of Russia during World War II. So, motifs, the motifs in the novel Animal Farm. So, what is a motif? Motif is a recurring idea or image in a work of literature, which is what this actually means is that what the author tries to inculcate, what the author tries to get across the idea, the main ideas through his work. So, motifs in Animal Farm. Language is a powerful tool used to convey and convince and sway the opinion of the masses. Okay, for example, pigs use their intelligence to take over the animal farm. Pigs create rules to benefit themselves. Napoleon has Squealer, who was a very wise and loquacious loquacious talker who kept on speaking for Napoleon to manipulate the animal's thoughts. Mm, Complicated language used to confuse unintelligent animals. Now Squealer amended the original commandments, but he tricked the animals into believing that no, the commandments were there as it is right from the scratch. So Squealer is a very cunning sort of a pig, and Napoleon uses his as his media manager or media campaign manager. So we can also relate these things in today's world, where media management, propaganda, warfare, all these things are very common even today. So education, how does George Orwell uses education, talks about education as a tool? Pigs are the most intelligent ones in the setting of Animal Farm. Horses are educated but cannot read. Donkeys and sheep can barely read. Pigs are literate and they alter the commandments to their benefit, but they are the only literate animals, and all the other illiterate animals don't get what they are. Okay, and the pigs are after absolute power. Squealer the pig made sure that only the pigs were educated. He believed that pigs were superior to all other animals. This quote is very famous from this novel. All animals are equal. Some are just more equal than others. So, a distinction between education and indoctrination. Orwell basically believes that educated people can speak their mind freely, but indoctrination, on the other hand, causes people to believe what they are told, not think. So, moving on to themes of the novel, the first theme is that history is bound to repeat itself. The animals focus so much on getting a better life without Mr. Jones, their original owner, that they don't recognize that the life with Napoleon, of course, a like animal, is just as bad or maybe even worse. Therefore, history is repeating itself without any of the animals even realizing it. So, this is a very strong theme in the novel. The second theme is the unintelligence of the social class. Okay, if the social class, if the masses are unintelligent and illiterate, then they have to pay it one way or the other. And here in the novel, the animals, not being able to read or write, are at a disadvantage because they cannot speak up for themselves, although they may have their suspicions. They have no way of proving it. So, theme number three, abuse of power. Once Napoleon got all the power, he suddenly started to take advantage of it. He made all other animals do the hard labor for him without much food, while he did nothing but control them and ate majority of the feed along with his greedy fellow pigs. Fourth theme, power corrupts people. Of course, we all have heard that power corrupts, but absolute power always corrupts. Power had corrupted Napoleon and the pigs. They made decisions they might never have if they didn't have power. These decisions included sleeping in beds, just like human beings, which they overthrew in the first place. They'd started trading with the humans, and they were not even fair with their fellow animals. So once the pigs got into power, they the power essentially corrupted them. And in the beginning, they resented power that humans were corrupt. Innate plus power compounded that corruption. But once pigs got the power, they also became corrupt. So it's a recurring theme in the novel, and George Orwell has indeed been able to get it across to the readers through these powerful themes in the novel. So that's it about Animal Farm from George Orwell. Uh, thank you for listening to it. Do subscribe to the channel, and yes, if you want me to make the videos on book reviews of other works, just type in the comments box. And of course, if you want any improvements, please mention. Your comments are very valuable to us. Thank you. Best of luck.